The ship is one of three sisters, the second of them, the newest, the largest, the most magnificent. She is 882 feet long, 46,000 tons of riveted steel, 11 decks high, lit by 10,000 electric lights, propelled by engines the size of cathedrals, capable of crossing the Atlantic in 7 days. 2,224 souls are aboard her on this fifth night out from Southampton, bound for New York. Tonight, at 11:40 p.m., she is going to strike an iceberg in the North Atlantic. By 2:20 the following morning, she will be on the bottom of the ocean, 2.5 miles down. More than 1,500 of the people now eating, sleeping, drinking, working, and dreaming aboard her are going to die. This is what those final hours looked like, deck by deck, as the most beautiful machine of the age sank slowly through her own architecture into the freezing dark below. Welcome aboard the RMS Titanic. It is 11:30 p.m., 10 minutes before everything begins. Using advanced AI trained on the testimony given to the British and American inquiries, the surviving accounts of passengers and crew written in the days and weeks after the disaster, the deck plans and engineering drawings of the White Star Line, and the photographs and films taken aboard the ship in the days before she sank, we have reconstructed the last night. She is steaming westward at 22.5 knots through a flat, calm sea under a moonless, brilliantly starlit sky. The air on deck is well below freezing. There are no whitecaps. There is no wind. The horizon, when the lookouts strain to find it, is almost impossible to see because the sea is as glassy and as black as the sky above it. Let us begin at the top of the ship and walk down through her decks in the order in which the disaster will eventually overtake them. Deck A, the first-class smoking room, 11:30 p.m. A handful of gentlemen in white tie evening wear sit in deep leather chairs beneath stained glass windows and a coffered ceiling carved like an old English club. The smoking room is one of the most exclusive rooms aboard, reserved for men only, the air heavy with cigar smoke and the smell of fine brandy. The card players at the small green baize tables are playing for sums of money that would feed a workingman's family for a year. A retired colonel discusses the recent political situation in Europe with a New York banker. An English aristocrat reads the day's bridge column in a freshly printed onboard newspaper. Among the passengers travelling first class on this voyage are some of the wealthiest people on Earth. The richest of them, a New York real estate heir travelling with his young pregnant second wife, has a personal fortune so vast that newspapers track his daily movements like the weather. Other names in the first-class manifest include a Macy's department store founder and his wife, a millionaire mining heir, several senior officers of the steel and shipping industries, and the very designer of the ship herself, travelling proudly aboard her maiden voyage. No one in this room knows it, but in 10 minutes, their world is going to crack. Deck B, the first-class staterooms, 11:35 p.m. One deck below, behind polished oak doors and engraved brass nameplates, the wealthiest passengers are preparing for bed. The first-class staterooms aboard the Titanic are unlike any cabins ever before put to sea. They are full apartments. The largest of them include private promenades along the side of the ship, multiple bedrooms, a separate sitting room, a private bath with porcelain fixtures, and walls panelled in mahogany or carved oak. The bedding is fine linen and silk. The lamps are Art Nouveau bronze. The carpets are deep and patterned. A maid in one such suite is laying out her mistress's robe and slippers and turning down the heavy embroidered bed cover. A valet in another is polishing a pair of evening shoes by the light of a Tiffany lamp. A young woman in a third reads a novel propped on her pillow, her hair already brushed for the night. The faint vibration of the ship's engines 2.5 decks below is felt only as a soft hum through the carpet beneath bare feet. The Titanic is so smooth, so well insulated, so vast, that many of the first-class passengers have already remarked that she feels less like a ship than like a great floating hotel. The bridge. 11:39 p.m. High above the staterooms, on the navigating bridge open to the freezing night air, the officer of the watch and the helmsman peer out into the darkness. In the crow's nest, 60 feet above the forecastle, 2 lookouts stand the 4-hour ice watch in the bitter cold. They have, by misfortune, no binoculars. The key to the binocular locker was misplaced before the voyage. They are watching the sea with their bare eyes. The captain is asleep in his cabin. He has left orders to be notified if anything changes. Through the long evening, the Titanic has received multiple wireless messages from other ships warning of ice in the area. Some of these warnings have been delivered to the bridge. Others, due to the sheer volume of personal telegrams being sent between wealthy passengers and shore, have not. At 11:39 p.m., one of the lookouts in the crow's nest sees something. He squints into the black. The shape resolves, slowly, into a vast mass directly ahead. He yanks the warning bell 3 times. He picks up the telephone. He gives the 3 most famous words in maritime history: iceberg right ahead. The officer on the bridge orders the helmsman to turn hard and the engines to be reversed. The Titanic begins to swing. She is too close and she is too big. At 11:40 p.m., she scrapes along the side of the iceberg below the waterline, a glancing brush that lasts only a few seconds, while above the waterline, a shower of ice tumbles onto the forward decks. Passengers in their staterooms feel a faint shudder, a brief tremor like a heavy door closing somewhere far away. Some go back to sleep. Some get out of bed to look. They have just felt the moment of their own deaths. Deck E, the working decks. 11:42 p.m. Far below the staterooms, on a working deck running most of the length of the ship, the iron passageway, nicknamed by the crew Scotland Road, is suddenly disturbed. Stewards and stokers heading to and from their shifts feel a much sharper jolt than the first-class passengers above them. From compartments along the starboard side comes a strange sound, a long hissing roar of water under pressure. A mail clerk in the mailroom, on this same level near the front of the ship, looks up from sorting letters and sees seawater pouring in beneath a bulkhead. Within minutes, the mailroom floor is ankle deep. The clerks begin, with extraordinary devotion to duty, dragging the heavy sacks of mail toward higher decks. They will continue to do this for as long as they can. They will all die. Decks G and below, the boiler rooms. 11:45 p.m. Deep in the body of the ship, in compartments so far below the waterline that they sit almost at the keel, the men who shovel the coal that drives the Titanic feel the impact like a hammer blow on the steel. In Boiler Room 6, the most forward of them, a great wall of seawater suddenly bursts through the side plating about 2 feet above the boiler room floor, spraying inward with terrifying force. The men, stripped to the waist and black with coal dust, drop their shovels and run. The watertight door at the rear of the compartment begins to close, descending slowly on its hydraulic guides. They scramble under it, the last of them rolling beneath the falling steel just before it seals. Throughout the lower decks, dozens of similar watertight doors are closing. The Titanic has been designed with 16 watertight compartments and a system of doors that can be closed remotely from the bridge in seconds. She is supposed to be able to float with any 4 of these compartments flooded. The newspapers, in their enthusiasm, have called her unsinkable. But the iceberg has opened, by various estimates, 6 compartments along the starboard bow. She cannot float with 6. The ship is going to sink. The designer, summoned to the bridge in his dressing gown, makes the calculation in his head and tells the captain that the Titanic has, at the outside, about 2 hours. The captain absorbs this information in silence and gives the order to begin uncovering the lifeboats. Deck D, the first-class dining saloon, 12:05 a.m. The vast first-class dining room, more than 100 feet long, is empty now, dim except for a few standing lamps. The white-clothed tables are cleared. A few crystal glasses still sit on a side table. The room has fed 500 people earlier this evening, on the largest French menu ever served at sea. 11 courses, including oysters, salmon, filet mignon, roast duckling, lamb with mint sauce, parfaits, éclairs, and chilled French champagne. A young pantry steward walking quickly through the saloon on his way to wake a passenger notices the slightest tilt of the room. The huge potted palms in the corners are very faintly leaning forward toward the bow. He thinks for a moment that he is imagining it. He is not. The Titanic is beginning to settle by the head. Deck F, third class, 12:25 a.m. Deep in the bow of the ship, 3 decks below the waterline, the third-class passengers, called steerage, are in trouble. They have travelled in conditions that, by the standards of immigrant transport in 1912, are remarkably clean and comfortable. Their berths are in shared cabins, 2 or 4 to a room. There are dining saloons, smoking rooms, and a general room for socialising, all decorated in simple but well-built pine panelling. There is more than enough food, plain but plentiful. Many of the steerage passengers are emigrants from Ireland, Scandinavia, Italy, Lebanon, Eastern Europe, travelling to America to start new lives. They have packed everything they own into a few wooden trunks. They have spent the savings of their families on this ticket. Now they are deep in the front of a sinking ship. The corridors of the third-class section in many places are confusing mazes of passageways, stairs, and steel gates that have been left closed by stewards trying to maintain order. Some passengers, awakened by water creeping into their cabins, are climbing the stairs only to find the gates between third class and the upper decks closed. Some will eventually be released. Some will not, or not in time. A family of 7 from Ireland sits together in a passageway, their suitcases beside them, praying in unison while their youngest child sleeps on her mother's shoulder. Above them, the first-class lifeboats are beginning to be lowered. Boat deck, 12:45 a.m. Up on the top deck, in the freezing night, the lifeboats are being uncovered, swung out and loaded. There are 16 wooden lifeboats and 4 collapsible boats. Even if every one of them is filled to capacity, they can carry barely more than half the people on board. The Titanic, like other passenger ships of her age, was not required by maritime regulations to carry enough lifeboat space for every soul aboard. The regulations, written in an earlier era, were based on tonnage, not passenger numbers. No one on this ship really believed they would need them. The first boats are loaded with first-class women and children, under the order "Women and Children First," given by the captain. Many of the boats are launched only partially filled, because frightened passengers and inexperienced crewmen are uncertain whether the davits will hold the weight, and because many passengers, looking down at the dark water far below, refuse to leave the apparent safety of the brightly lit ship for the small wooden boats. A band of musicians from the second-class salon assembles on deck and begins to play. They will play for the entire descent. Multiple survivors will testify to this. The music is reported by various witnesses as ragtime, then as waltzes, and eventually, in their last minutes, as the hymn, "Nearer, My God, to Thee." None of the band will survive. Bridge and wireless, 1:20 a.m. In the wireless room behind the bridge, the 2 telegraphers are sending distress calls in Morse code as fast as they can. They are using the older signal, CQD, and the newer signal, SOS, recently adopted internationally. Several ships hear them. The nearest, the Carpathia, immediately turns around and steams at her absolute maximum speed toward the Titanic's position, but she is 58 miles away, 4 hours steaming. The Californian, a smaller ship much closer, is shut down for the night with her wireless operator asleep. Her bridge will report seeing strange lights and what may be rockets on the horizon, but her captain will fail to act on them. The Carpathia is too far away to reach the Titanic in time. The Californian is close enough and will not come. The 2 telegraphers continue to send their signals as the lights in the wireless room flicker. They will stay at their posts until the captain personally releases them from duty in the last minutes. Boiler rooms, 1:45 a.m. Deep below, the engineers and stokers are still at work. The Titanic's electric lights are still burning brightly, because the engineering crew, working in compartments that are flooding around them, are keeping the dynamos running. They know the lights are needed by those on deck loading the boats. They know the wireless room cannot function without power. 35 engineers from the engine room and boiler rooms will remain at their posts as the water rises. Every single one of them will die. Their bodies will not be recovered. A plaque dedicated to them will later be erected in their home port of Southampton, where many of them lived in a few crowded streets near the docks. Many widows on those streets will receive the same news on the same morning. The end. 2:18 a.m. By now, the bow of the Titanic is deep underwater. The stern is rising into the air. The angle of the deck is so steep that passengers have to cling to railings, deck chairs, and steam pipes to keep from sliding. The remaining people on board, perhaps 1,500 souls who could not get into a boat, are gathered toward the stern, which is now hundreds of feet above the sea. The great chandeliers in the first-class staircase tear loose. Furniture slides toward the bow with a terrible cascade of sound. At 2:18 a.m., the lights aboard the ship flicker once and then go out for the last time. Around 2:20 a.m., the Titanic breaks in two near the third funnel, the two halves sinking separately into the dark Atlantic. The water temperature is just below freezing. The few hundred people thrown into the sea who are not in lifeboats can survive perhaps 15 to 30 minutes in such water. The lifeboats, most of them only partially filled, mostly do not return. The screaming from the water, multiple survivors will testify, lasts perhaps half an hour, and then it ends. By the time the Carpathia arrives at 4:10 a.m., the Titanic is gone, and so are more than 1,500 of the people who sailed on her. In the years that followed, the inquiries and the courts would assign blame in 100 different directions. New laws would require enough lifeboats on every passenger ship for every soul aboard. International ice patrols would be established. Wireless requirements would be tightened. The myth of unsinkability would be quietly buried at sea with the ship itself. But what cannot be undone is the architecture of the dying. The first-class passengers, who lived on the upper decks, survived in much higher proportions than the third-class passengers, who lived in the bow and the lower decks where the water came first. The men in the boiler rooms, whose work powered every other deck of the ship, are buried with her 2.5 miles down. The class hierarchy of the great floating hotel did not disappear in the disaster. It sank along the lines it had always lived along. History remembers the millionaires who went down with the Titanic. But the ship's true mass grave is the engine room.